In the name of the Lord Jesus, welcome to American Reformed Church. We are delighted that you are with us this morning. Please join us in the responsive call to worship. Come, O people, sing praise to the Lord our God,
whose steadfast love endures forever. Come, O people, sing praise to the Maker of heaven and earth,
whose steadfast love endures forever. Come, O people, sing praise to the ruler over the day and of the night,
whose steadfast love endures forever. Come, O people, sing praise to the source of all life,
whose steadfast love endures forever. Come, O people, sing praise to the God of gods, whose steadfast love endures forever.
Come, O people, sing praise.
God's steadfast love endures forever.
And we rise to sing praise together to this God of steadfast love, singing, "Come, Christians, join to sing."
Friends, God welcomes us to this place with these wonderful words: grace and peace to you from him who is and who was and who is to come, and from the seven spirits who are before his throne, and from Jesus Christ, who is the faithful witness, the firstborn of the dead, and the ruler of the kings of the earth. Friends, the peace of Christ be with you.
And also with you.
Congregation may be seated. Praise is his gracious choice. Did you catch that line in the song that we just sang? Praise is his gracious choice. Because of God's grace for us, we have the ability to worship this morning. And yet we recognize as we sing those words that we have not always lived into that gracious choice. We have not loved God with heart, mind, soul, and strength. And we have not loved our neighbor as much as we love ourselves. And so we find this need to come clean before God and before one another through a time of confession. This morning we do that through a song, and that song is "O Great God." The congregation may remain seated as we offer this song of confession, our prayer of confession before God.
O great God of highest heaven,
responsive words of assurance. For God, who abounds in mercy and great love for us, even when we were dead through our trespasses and sin, made us alive together with Christ, so that by grace we have been saved through faith. This is not our own doing. No, it is God's gracious gift to us. Friends, know that you are forgiven people and go forth to live in that peace. We now come to the part of our service where we hear God's word for us. We do so first with a word for the children through this morning's children's message as Bo Korselman leads us. Let's watch together.
Good morning, everybody. I would like to talk to you today about something called trust and being trustworthy. Now, what does it mean to be trustworthy or to have trust in someone? I want you to think about someone that you know you can trust and someone you know you probably don't want to trust. Now, don't say any names, but think about two different people, one you know you can trust and one you probably don't want to trust. And think about why it is you know you can trust someone and why you probably don't want to trust someone. I'm going to tell you a story. When I was younger, there was a person in my grade that really wanted people to like this person. So this classmate of mine would tell all sorts of stories. And after a while, we're starting to think about the stories that this person told and be like, I don't think that's true. But this person really wanted to be liked, really wanted to fit in, really wanted people to see this person in a certain way. So continued to tell stories that most everybody believed were not true. So what do you think we thought about that person? Could we trust that person? No, probably not. We had spent enough time with that person to know that the stories that they told were usually not true. In the Bible, we're talking about and learning about a man named Joseph, who was the opposite of the friend that I had in school, that was consistently trustworthy. He was trustworthy in a lot of really bad situations, too. He was betrayed by his brothers. He was taunted and teased and bullied to do something that he knew he wasn't supposed to do, and he didn't give in. He was even lied about, and he still was trustworthy. He continued to be trustworthy in all these situations. Now, what made him so trustworthy? What made him so great? I think it has to do with his relationships, and especially his relationship with God. He knew who he was in God's eyes, and he knew that God was with him, and he knew that he was with God. He had a clear sense that God was always going to be with him, and he didn't need to change who he was to fit in or to make somebody happy or to be a certain way, because he was who he was supposed to be, because he knew that God was with him and that God was always going to be with him. And that is how God made him to be. And so by doing those things, he was proving over and over again that he was trustworthy. That is so cool. I want you to try to do that with me this week, to think about how we can be trustworthy and know that we can be trustworthy because we know who we are to God. We are God's.
As we prepare our hearts to hear God's word this morning, please rise and join us in singing To Every Generation.
Generation
a sanctuary to us. From the youngest to the oldest, we find our place in you. This morning, as we gather in this place to hear your words, may we hear them in such a way that they take root and grow fruit in our lives that reveals your presence and your grace to the world. It's in your name, and together we say, amen. You may be seated. So we are in the midst of a new sermon series, Joseph and the Bravery of Belonging, following the story of Joseph in Genesis from chapter 37 to about 50. And so each Sunday we hear a little bit longer passage than we're used to maybe at some points, because we're really following through this story. This morning we hear the entirety of chapter 39, which is admittedly a little shorter than chapter 37 from last week. Let's hear the word of the Lord together. Now Joseph was taken down to Egypt, and Potiphar, the officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him from the Ishmaelites who had brought him down there. The Lord was with Joseph, and he became a successful man. He was even in the house of his Egyptian master. His master saw that the Lord was with Joseph, and that the Lord caused all that Joseph did to prosper in his hand. So Joseph found favor in his master's sight, and he made him overseer of all that was in his house, putting him in charge of all that he had. From the time that he had made him overseer of the house and over all that he had, the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. The blessing of the Lord was upon all that he had in house and field. So he left all that he had in Joseph's charge, and with him there, he had no concern for anything but the food in his house. Now Joseph was handsome and good-looking. And after a time, his master's wife cast her eyes on Joseph and said, "Lie with me." But he refused and said to his master's wife, "Look, with me here, my master has no concern about anything in the house. Everything has been entrusted to me. There is no one in this house that is more responsible than I am, and he has not withheld anything from me except yourself, because you are his wife. How then could I do this wickedness and sin against God?" And although she spoke to Joseph day after day after day, he would not consent to lie with her. One day, however, when he went to the house to do his work, and while no one else was in the house, she caught hold of his garment, saying, "Lie with me." But he left his garment in her hand, and he fled out of the house. When she saw that he had left his garment and fled outside, she called out to the members of her household and said to them, "See, my husband has brought among us a Hebrew to insult us. He came in to me to lie with me, and I cried out with a loud voice. And when he heard me raise my voice and cry out, he left his garment and fled outside." Then she kept his garment by her until his master came home, and she told him, "The Hebrew servant whom you have brought among us came to insult me. But as soon as I raised my voice and cried out, he left his garment beside me and fled outside." Now when his master heard these words, his wife saying, "This is the way your servant treated me," he became enraged. And Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. He remained there in prison. But the Lord was with Joseph and showed him steadfast love. He gave him favor in the sight of the chief jailer, and the chief jailer committed to Joseph's care all the prisoners who were in the prison, and whatever was done there, Joseph was the one who did it. The chief jailer paid no heed to anything that was in Joseph's care, because the Lord was with Joseph. And whatever he did, the Lord made it prosper. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Chameleons. Chameleons. They are fascinating creatures. I spent way too much time reading about them this week. There are some species known for changing the outsides of their bodies, their skin's color, and even the pattern of the skin. Sometimes they do this to communicate to other chameleons. Sometimes they do this in order to blend in and fit in with their surroundings. Sometimes, we humans, we're like chameleons. Changing our appearance, maybe, our language, our behavior, our very selves to blend in, to fit in with our surroundings. A quest, perhaps, of belonging in this world around us. The first time I remember trying out my chameleon skills was way back in Miss Hooper's kindergarten class, where the learning part of school seemed really fun and easy, but the social politics of kindergarten left me feeling awkward and confused and on the outs by myself most of the time, which was why one day, when my classmate Nikki asked me to play with her at the farmhouse and the barn in the back corner of Miss Hooper's room next to the window that overlooked the playground, I was both excited because someone actually asked me to play, and nervous because I wasn't sure I knew how to play the right way, as if there's a right way to play with a farmhouse and a barn. I remember following her, this vibrating ball of excitement and nerves, trying to blend in and fit in with Nikki. I sat on my knees just like she did. I raised and lowered my voice just like she did. I arranged my animals just like she did. And then when she slipped one of those toy farm animals into her pocket and whispered, "You do it too. No one will ever know if we take a couple home." I slipped one into my pocket, just like she did. That's right, one of your pastors is a thief. Even though I knew it was wrong, even though I didn't really want to do it, I did want to belong, to fit. I chameleoned, if you will. I wish I could say that after my walk of shame back to school, when my mother found out what I did, to confess my crime to my teacher, I learned my lesson. But nope. I channeled my inner chameleon when I signed up for softball, like a handful of my friends, even though I was absolutely petrified of actually hitting and catching the ball. The career was short-lived. I channeled my inner chameleon when I tried but failed every day of 7th grade to tease up my bangs 3 or 4 inches like every other girl in my class, even though my naturally flat, stick-straight hair just wasn't meant to attain such a height. And if I'm honest, fitting in, belonging, wasn't just the quest of my youth. The quest to fit in, to blend, to feel like I belong did not magically end when I began adulting. I spent a good portion of my life asking myself, who do I need to be to belong to these people? What's the right way to act so I fit in here? The quest to fit in, to feel like I belong, lured me into countless situations that I did not like and would not have chosen for myself. And I was well into adulthood, participating in an adult discipleship class at Meredith Drive Reformed Church on living purposefully with God, when my concept of belonging was upended. When I was confronted with the truth that there is a big difference between fitting in and belonging, true belonging, the kind of belonging God has created us for and called us after in God's own image. Researcher and author Brené Brown helps us distinguish between the two, fitting in and belonging. She writes, "Fitting in is the greatest barrier to belonging. Fitting in, I've discovered during the past decade of research, is assessing situations and groups of people, then twisting yourself into a human pretzel in order to get them to let you hang out with them. Belonging, on the other hand, belonging is something else entirely. It's showing up and letting yourself be seen and known as you really are. Love of gourd painting, intense fear of public speaking, horrendous fashion sense and all. Fitting in is about assessing a situation and becoming who we need to be accepted. Belonging doesn't require us to change who we are at all. It invites us to just be who we are. And I might add to Brené's words what I learned in that adult discipleship class, which was true belonging doesn't require us to change who we are. It invites us to be who God has created us to be. The story of Joseph, found within the pages of Genesis from chapters 37 to 50, gives us a peek into what it looks like to live a life of true belonging, of this kind of belonging in which we are invited to be who God has created us to be. Last week, if you were here, you remember that we met a messy, far from ideal family who would never be the subjects of a Norman Rockwell painting, a family that featured a father who played favorites, a set of brothers in the throes of sibling rivalry, and an unfiltered, tattle-telling, favored and trusted son, but envied brother named Joseph. So envied, in fact, as you remember, his brothers plotted his murder. But ultimately, the kind guys that they were, they just settled on selling him into slavery. Which is exactly where we find Joseph this week, serving as a slave for Potiphar, an important official in the land of Egypt. And in this installment, for the very first time in Joseph's story, just as he finds himself betrayed and abandoned by his family and in a foreign land, the story explicitly names God, Yahweh. The Lord, Yahweh, was with Joseph. Did you remember that? Did you hear it? The truth, of course, as Pastor Mike mentioned in last week's installment, where God was not named at all in that part of the story, is that just because God is not named does not mean God is not present. This is probably one of the greatest misunderstandings of how we think God works in the world. Humans have never needed to name God for God to be present and at work. God is not Beetlejuice. If you're not a child of the 80s, you might want to Google that later. In fact, God would not have needed to be explicitly named in that portion of the story from last week at all, because God's presence with and claim to Jacob and Jacob's family had been promised. It had been covenanted by God time and time again. In fact, Jacob and his family lived in their current location of Canaan because God affirmed that claim just a few chapters earlier, saying to Jacob, "Return to the land of your ancestors and to your kindred, and I will be with you." In fact, once Jacob and his family settled in Canaan, God is not mentioned explicitly again because God's presence with and claim over Jacob and his family in the land of Canaan was assumed. They knew God was with them in that place. But Joseph had been betrayed and abandoned by his family, the family who God had promised to be with. And Joseph is no longer in Canaan, where God promised to be. Their message to him was as clear as day. You do not belong with us, and you do not belong here in this place, and lest anyone assume that the brothers' actions spoke for God, and that God too had abandoned Joseph, or anyone supposed that God's claim was conditional to Canaan. In this section of Joseph's story, we find God referenced explicitly 10 times by the divine name Yahweh or Elohim, 10 times in half as many verses as last week's section. 4 of those times were exact repetitions of the same phrase, 2 at the beginning as a slave in Potiphar's house, and 2 at the end as a disgraced, slandered prisoner. The Lord, Yahweh, was with Joseph. The brothers' message was clear as day. You do not belong with us, and you do not belong here in this place. And God's message was even clearer. You belong with me. I am with you. This phrase and its slight variations are repeated often from Genesis to Revelation to designate God's claim, first over the specific family of Abraham and Sarah, and then over the tribes of Jacob's sons, and then over the entire nation of Israel, and then through Jesus to all people. I am with you. The Lord, Yahweh, was with Joseph. And here it is especially significant because it's really the first time it was made clear that God's claim transcended familial and geographic boundaries. One commentator writes, Joseph is far removed from his family and outside the land of promise, yet God stays with him, simultaneously upending and expanding the ancient understanding of God's claim. God had claimed Joseph. This claim did not promise a trouble-free, trial-less life, but rather assured Joseph that no matter who he was with, what he was doing, or where he was located, God was with him. He was with God. Joseph, in other words, Joseph belonged in the truest sense of belonging, not dependent on his brother's acceptance, his father's favor and approval, his address, his status to God. He was with God because true belonging is rooted in God. And it's this type of belonging, rooted in God, that allowed Joseph to do something pretty difficult, something I haven't always mastered myself. This true belonging to something bigger than himself, namely God, freed Joseph to do something most of us still struggle with. Joseph was free to be fully, authentically who God created him to be in every circumstance. Truth be told, I'm not sure that Joseph had a chameleon-like impulse in his body. Did you notice, after all, that Joseph is strangely consistent in who he was and how he showed up, no matter the circumstances he finds himself in, the people he finds himself next to, the job that he's been asked to do? We get our first glimpse of this. We got it last week when Joseph was a boy, a young man. He was sent to oversee his brother's work, even the older brother's work, because he was diligent and trustworthy and responsible. Now, perhaps we could chalk that up to circumstance. After all, he was the favored son. But then betrayed, abandoned, and thrust into slavery. Favored son no longer, yet Joseph is still consistent, diligent, trustworthy, responsible, so much so that he was valued and appreciated, moving from outside labor to inside work to in charge of everything except, interestingly enough, food. Joseph apparently wasn't great at meal planning because he wasn't in charge of the food. But everything else was Joseph's. Then, given opportunity to blend in, when pressured to betray his master, the person who bought him as a slave by his master's wife, he refused, even at a cost. Even when he stood completely alone, he was diligent, trustworthy, responsible, and then finding himself once more slandered and betrayed by his master's wife, then abandoned to prison by his master, he was what? Yep, diligent, trustworthy, responsible, moved from prisoner to one responsible for all the prisoners. For all his human faults, fails, foibles, and lack of filter, he was consistently diligent, trustworthy, reliable. The assurance of God's claim of true belonging rooted in God, no matter who he was with and what he was doing and where he was located, freed Joseph to be consistently and fully who he was created to be, no matter the circumstance. This is true belonging. The type of belonging rooted with and in God that invites us, frees us to be who we have been created by God to be, even when that means we stand alone. That is a completely different understanding of fitting in and even belonging than we might have. Chameleons. Chameleons are hardwired to change. They're created to blend in to their surroundings. We are not. In experimental collaborations of social scientists and neuroscientists, we've discovered that humans are hardwired to seek belonging, to feel like we are connected to something larger than our individual selves. We have been created to crave and long for and desire to be a part of something bigger than ourselves, so much so that neuroscientist Matthew Lieberman says that a sense of belonging is proven to be as fundamental a human need as our need for food and water. We need to feel connected to something bigger than ourselves as much as we need food and water to thrive. Just as we are propelled to seek out food to satisfy our hunger or drink to quench our thirst, we are propelled to satisfy our inner longing to be a part of something bigger than ourselves, to belong. But have you noticed that we humans were open to substitutes? We're open to quick fixes to fulfill our needs. I mean, that's why, if I'm honest, I grab a handful of my very favorite Lindt dark chocolate truffles when I'm hungry, even though I know that my need will be fulfilled better by complete proteins and complex carbs and dietary fiber. Or this is why you might grab a Mountain Dew when you are thirsty, even though water is proven to quench your thirst. We are open, suggestible to substitutes and quick fixes. And that is why we chameleon ourselves. Change our clothes, laugh at someone else's crude jokes, find it difficult to say no, compromise our values and beliefs, so often settling for fitting in, that substitute, over true belonging that can only be found when we recognize that God is something bigger than ourselves that we are connected to, that God is the one to whom we belong more than anything. And this belonging frees us to be exactly who we've been created to be. No chameleon skills needed. That's the alternate vision of belonging. True belonging that Joseph's story gives us. God is with us. God claims us. And in that claim invites us, gives us complete freedom to live fully and authentically as we have been created to be. It is this very truth, this truth of true belonging that is echoed in that question and answer, Heidelberg Catechism, question 1. Some of you might know it. That I am not my own, but belong body and soul. That I am not my own, but belong body and soul, in life and in death, to my faithful Savior, God with us, Jesus Christ. But how do we do that? If we've spent our lives settling for that substitute of fitting in, how do we live into true belonging rooted in God that invites us to be who God created us to be? Remember that adult discipleship class on living purposefully in God I referenced, where my concept of belonging was upended, where I discovered that I had settled for that substitute of fitting in over true belonging? You see, I had spent so much time being a chameleon, changing myself to blend and fit, that I wasn't, honestly, really even sure who God created me to be at all. And so during this class, I was handed a couple stacks of Post-it notes and a poster board. And I was introduced to an important spiritual practice, a spiritual discipline. You've heard of those. We think of prayer and scripture study and maybe meditation. But here's another one. And it looks like this. Doesn't look like much, does it? But this is a prayerful practice that helps us see how God has been with us, claiming us, moving in our lives. It helps us to see how God has been creating us from first breath until this current one now by reflecting on each person and moment and circumstance in your life. I've done this practice a few times. You can tell each time looks different, right? What happens is you grab 2 different colored stacks of Post-it notes, something to write with in a poster board. You pray and you ask God to help you see and remember your past and your present. And then you sit and reflect, and you think of all the people in your life, and you write their name, each name on a different Post-it note, from first thought to the present moment: parents, siblings, children, family members, teachers, coaches, friends, church members, neighbors, coworkers, even strangers, whether they've positively impacted you or negatively. And then you take the second color of Post-it note and you do the same with events and moments in your life and circumstances. And you write every single moment that comes into mind: family change, marriage, divorce, death, children, moving to a new school or home, something that's disappointed you, painful moments, health challenges, changes in friendships, significant circumstances, exciting moments, every event that comes to mind. If something or someone comes to mind, it is important to your life. And then you take each one of these things and you arrange them on a timeline from the day of your first breath until your present moment. What comes next is an opportunity to sit and reflect on guiding questions that invite you to see the ways in which God has been at work from your very first moment until now. To see the ways that God has created you to be. It is through this process that I noticed that I did have a tendency to chameleon myself, except when other people were being left out or bullied or teased or marginalized. In those moments, I stood out and I spoke out, no matter the cost. And I saw that's who God created me to be. And I saw other ways and learned other things about myself too. We want to invite you to engage the spiritual discipline, the spiritual practice too. Some of you have already done that. If you were a profession of faith student last year, if you participated in Ritter Church's Learning Change or that adult discipleship class that we walked through this process a few years ago, and our high school students will be using that practice this year as well, we want to invite others, no pressure. At the end of the service, where the bulletin is, usually there will be a sheet that outlines an abbreviated version of this process for you to take, go home with, and perhaps engage in this practice on your own, this spiritual discipline. A spiritual discipline that gives you an opportunity, an invitation to see God's true belonging with you, like Joseph, rooted in God and freeing you to be who God has created you to be in every circumstance. And all God's people say together, amen. Please pray with me. God, like our spiritual ancestors who you claimed so long ago, like your claim upon Joseph, you have claimed us, and we have known your love and experienced your care and provision. You invite us to extend that love to the world around us, to care for others as deeply as we care for ourselves. And so we bring the needs of our world before you now. We pray for the many who do not have enough food to eat, enough water, clean water to drink, enough shelter to keep them warm, enough sense of belonging in you, enough employment, enough money to pay their bills, enough medicine, enough medical care. God, we lift them up to you and to your provisional hand. We pray also for those who have more than enough, but who struggle to find meaning and purpose in life, who indulge in dangerous or self-serving activities to dull the pain and loneliness, who compromise their values and beliefs to fit in to their surroundings as a substitute for true belonging. If that is our struggle even in this place, oh God, be with us. Encourage us and empower us in our sense of identity in you, that we may be people who live out consistently your created image in the world. We pray too for this world beyond, for all the people and places who have a deep sense, a need to belong to you, O God. Your grace reaches out to all of us. You call all of us as people created in your image, working together with one heart and mind, and so strengthen us all to live in a manner worthy of the good news we have received, that we truly belong to you, and that belonging invites us to live in this world authentically and fully, where the last are first, the first are last, and there is grace enough for all. Together, we pray and offer these prayers, and we pray them in the name of Jesus, the prayer that he taught us to pray. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as in heaven. Give us today our daily bread. Forgive us our sins as we forgive those who sin against us. Save us from the time of trial, and deliver us from evil. For the kingdom, the power, and the glory are yours, now and forever. Amen.
As we continue with worship, please rise and join us if you wish. We're singing a new song, so join in when you feel comfortable.
Gift of grace is Jesus my Redeemer. There is no more for heaven now to give. He is my will bring me home. And day by day, I know He will renew me until I stand with joy before the throne. To this I hold, my hope is only Jesus. All the glory evermore to Jesus. When the race is complete, still my lips shall repeat, yet not I, but through Christ in me. To this I hold, my hope is on Jesus. All the glory evermore to Jesus. When the race is complete, still my lips shall repeat, yet not I, but through Christ in me. When the race is complete, still my lips shall repeat, yet not I, but through Christ in me. Yet not I, but through Christ in me. Yet not I, but through Christ in me.
Friends, as we prepare to leave this place, we have just a few announcements for you, prayer updates as well. The first prayer announcement, we rejoice, we pray, give God praise for the marriage of Lori Cordles and Corey Anderson. They were married here on Tuesday this past week. So we praise God with them for that. And they have shared in that celebration by providing some really cute and delicious heart-shaped shortbread cookies. So those will be out among the other cookies today for cookie and coffee time. Let's praise God together for their marriage. And then also we join in prayer with Betty Breen, who found out this week that she has another blood clot in her heart and is on blood thinners to hopefully take care of that. So we extend our prayers for healing to her.
And just two programming announcements. First of all, pay attention to the adult discipleship programming opportunities. Unfortunately, due to lack of participation, Julie Elliott's class, Ministering to Others Beyond the Walls of ARC, will no longer be meeting. However, we want to encourage all the adults to consider attending Hope for the Disappointed Zealot, Ben Lappinga's class, which is in room 201 down at the end of the hall. And then today, Gail Marinkovich's class, Managing Our Emotions, Wisdom from the Psalms, will begin meeting in room 204, which is just outside here next to the kitchen. 204, that begins today. Adults here at ARC, I think one of the best things about this congregation is our adult discipleship opportunities. So we really want to encourage you to attend one of those two classes this morning following Coffee Fellowship. Also, we are going to be resuming a short-term holiday choir. So those of you that were part of the traditional sanctuary choir, we're going to resume a holiday choir. Rehearsals for that will begin the Saturday following Thanksgiving. There will be an announcement in this week's newsletter. And if you're interested in just participating in this short-term kind of a musical opportunity where you join your voice along with others in leading worship in the Advent and Christmas seasons, please email Philip DeCoster. His email address will be contained in that email. Please let him know. We would love to have you join them.
Friends, as you go out into the world this week to experience a sense of true belonging in God, to live as God has created you to be, may you hear these words ringing in your hearts and minds. The love of God, the grace of the Lord Jesus Christ, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be and abide with you now and always. Amen.